Hi there. My name is Laura Zelenak. I'm a health educator with the Center for Community Health Advancement with Marshfield Clinic Health System. And our department works on community health initiatives throughout the Marshfield Clinic Health System service area. And with Dr. Hartwig again today, and we're going to continue our discussion of behavioral health in schools. Dr. Hartwig is the creator of the b.e.s.t universal screening tool, and b.e.s.t stands for Behavioral Emotional Social Traits. And Marshfield Clinic Health System and Security Health Plan have been partnering with Dr. Hartwig for many years now to support behavioral health in schools. So thanks again for joining me, Dr. Hartwig. It's good to see you again.
Great. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to see you too. Thank you.
So we talked about doing this video a while ago, and when we first started doing these, it was before school started. We were getting ready for the school year, weren't exactly sure what that was going to look like in terms of COVID, and now we're several weeks in. There's a lot of COVID cases going on right now, and there's a lot of chaos. Schools are hybrid or in person or online. It's just kind of like this mixed bag. So what are you seeing in the schools that you're working with right now in terms of COVID?
Well, that's a great question. We've actually worked very hard and done personal interviews with a number of our districts, which we will continue to do, so we cover all of them. There are a couple of themes that have been coming out that I think are very important. First of all, you mentioned it too, that there is some uncomfortableness, and I think we're not synchronized yet. It's hard to find a predictable routine and structure, whether it be at school or whether it be at home. And what's happening is making people a bit more hypervigilant and a little uncomfortable. And I think people are struggling trying to find a balance. If you're a family, for example, finding a balance about, well, are my kids going to school or are they not going to school? If they're on a hybrid system, how do we provide support? And still, if you have a job and you have other responsibilities, how do you balance that? And then the same thing applies on the school side. The staff in many situations are overwhelmed by trying to meet the needs of kids in school who are there, and then also provide the remote learning instruction for other ones. So it's really trying to synchronize all these things. And I think two things that I think are important, and I'll talk about some of the themes that I'm seeing, that I think people are looking for it to be, that somehow it's going to calm down and that everything's going to be the same or as it was or a modified version of that. I think we just have to be sensitive to the fact that we're going to have to be able to adjust and tuck point as life goes on. Push the pause button when things don't go quite the way we expect them to go. When you have a plan and you're going on a trip, that you think you're going to take a certain route and all of a sudden you find out there's a detour. Well, it's frustrating and it's difficult, and sometimes it's a hard choice. Should I take this route or that route? Because you plan to go a certain way. I think you just have to act and be a bit more bolder than you feel as an adult, because it provides support for kids in terms of direction. So I think we have to have a plan, but we have to recognize that it might not be what we thought it was going to be. And if it doesn't turn out the way we think it is supposed to be, then we should be thinking about, okay, what's our next modification? It's sort of like in problem solving, there is never one right answer to every situation. So you have to be able to have multiple ways balance different potential solutions. If this happens, we could do this, or we could do this, or we could do that. And any one of those choices would be reasonable. So I think having a little bit more, putting us back in sync is going to be an important part of where we are, but also understanding we have to adjust to what's changing. But what I also see is that there is a disconnect, I think, sometimes between what people are seeing in kids' behaviors and what they're really experiencing in the home environment. For example, many of the school people, and these are the two themes, feel that the staff are struggling more because of balancing the in-school, out-of-school learning and all the implications for running a family themselves. But what's happening is the kids are coming to school. For those that are doing in-school programming, there's a great deal of excitement. Everybody has reported across the board the kids have really loved being back to school, connecting with their friends in spite of some of the idiosyncratic things that have occurred. But what they've also said is that the kids seem to be resilient, but it's like we're not maybe seeing who they actually are. There's some levels of anxiety that people are suggesting from what they're seeing is that it was like a honeymoon period. The kids came back, there was that exact wonderful feeling. But now we're starting to see some not regression, but really some expression of behavioral patterns that would be something that we would have expected. And I think that's important for families and school practitioners to know that some kids are going to be affected immediately by the things we've experienced, and some it's going to be a delayed reaction. And the key here is this, is that behavior is a communication tool. How kids act, they tell us a story about what's going on inside of them. Kids who previously didn't act out, for example, or struggle with their own feelings, now maybe experience that. These are transient situational issues, and parents have to be, and schools have to be ready to respond to them and anticipate that some kids may act like everything's okay, but inside they are not, and their behaviors are telling you a story. We have to pay attention to that, I think, very specifically.
Sounds like we really need to keep our eyes open and be super patient and just understand that we're going to have to go with the flow here for a while, huh?
Yeah, and I think not to be disappointed when things don't quite turn out the way you would expect, or that if a child or an adult, maybe it doesn't act in quite the way that you would have expected them to act. We have to understand the context of what occurred and how it affects us each individually. And if you go back to one of the first conversations we had, the one thing that's different about this than almost any other crisis that might have ever been exposed to families or kids or staff members in schools is that we all have experienced this same thing. We can be empathetic with each other because we all know that you've experienced this, or I've experienced it, or a child has gone through this. And that gives us a better understanding of what the potential solutions are, that we can get through this when we work in a systematic way together, and to pay attention to the behavior. When you see kids act a certain way that's not what you expected, they're telling you something. And the same thing with adults. Let's find out what they're trying to tell us. Let's get behind their words. Let's look at their emotions. Let's understand their feelings.
So what effect is this having on, I mean, you touched on the behavioral changes, but what effect in general is this having on our schools and on the students and maybe the teachers and relationship with parents even? Just sort of, I'm sure that it's a lot, but what are some of the big things, big effects?
I think the first and the most important is anxiety. And as you know, anxiety is curvilinear. Sometimes anxiety is good. It protects us. It's the mind's way to manage our world and to keep us out of harm's way. But sometimes when anxiety becomes overwhelming and you don't feel like you have control over things, sometimes it gets in the way of your ability to problem solve and make good decisions. And I think what happens is that the fear of the unknown, the anticipation of something you don't know is going to happen is what makes people feel even more uncomfortable, in children as well. And again, that's why this getting us in sync is going to be an important part of what we do. When you have visual schedules, when you have predictable structure and routines, when you take the time. For example, I went for a walk this morning, and noticing things that are so important to all of us, nature and life and all the other good things that are going on. We don't seem to pay attention to the good things. We are focusing an awful lot on, well, COVID is certainly a difficult and unbelievable situation for all of us, but there are still good things that are happening, and we need to be able to emphasize those. So trying to build on that and not being a Pollyanna and trying to pretend like nothing's here, but saying that there's an awful lot of good that's still happening. In fact, there's more good than there is bad. And we need to be able to find that balance when we can, understanding the struggles that many families are going through, and children as well.
Mm-hmm. Good thoughts, good advice. I know that b.e.s.t developed an external assessor this year that you're using for the first time. That's a way for parents and caregivers to interact with the schools through b.e.s.t. Tell us more about that and what the goal of that, the purpose of that external assessor is.
Well, one of the things that's been important for us is to be able to open up communication lines. So if a student doesn't come to school but is homeschooled in terms of the instructional virtual reality environment, the situation is that teachers aren't going to see them in the same context. So we thought, well, we need to be able to quantify how children behave in another environment, and that context always tells the tale. So what we thought is if we could capture what it looks like for parents or caregivers or other people that work with children, nannies, whoever's in the home environment, we could capture that perspective and then communicate it in a way that everybody sort of sees it the same way, just like we do when we do multiple screenings and b.e.s.t in school. It's good to compare and contrast. Why does a child act this way in this situation and not that way in this one? And how do they manage this problem in that situation and not here? What's the difference? And there's independent variables that we as parents or as we as practitioners, we can control. We control the environment. We help manage children's physiology. We balance the setting events, and we actually help define things that kids are engaged in terms of learning opportunities. So I think the external assessor piece allows us to open up a communication change that we've talked about for years, and many schools do it in different ways, but b.e.s.t helps us talk the same language, and we're very excited. We're just about ready to launch it. We just finished the last technical piece this morning and should be ready. And so b.e.s.t user schools are going to be able to have parents or other people outside of the system to screen children, and the information will come back to a problem-solving team in the school, and then we can start to compare and contrast and look at similarities and differences. And again, the key here, as we've always said with b.e.s.t, is about matching interventions that are most likely to support children's behavioral health. This isn't about labeling or categorizing kids. It's helping families and schools to have a common ground. If I may say, when we were doing the test drive, I did a number of questionnaire interviews. Instead of the parent screening the child independently, what I did is I read the questions and then had the parent reflect on what they thought the rating for the behavior would be. And what was extraordinary about it, and was not unlike what I used to do when I was a school psychologist practitioner, the parent would give me all sorts of examples before they would rate the specific behavior or the construct. So we had a very robust discussion, and it was a really eye-opening communication on both sides, by the way, for the parent as well as for me about this child's needs. And we had a wonderful discussion about potential suggestions that they could use and implement in the home that we can support in the school environment.
That, just thinking through that, it sounds like it's going to be such a game changer, you know, because I hear so many parents that their teachers are like, oh, they're an angel. And they're like, what? They're not an angel at home.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really cool to see. So that link, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, we're very excited about it. And we know that, you know, there's going to be some ins and outs. And so we've added a survey component because we want to know from people. And again, external assessors could be more than just parents, guardians, grandparents, family members, nannies, you know, coaches, whatever. But we also included a survey because we want to see, are we capturing what it is they want to know? And so I think that's going to be an important part for our well-being as well for the future. But we're very excited, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback from our b.e.s.t users that they're very excited about this.
Cool. Well, we'll look forward to more information on that for sure. I'm sure we'll be sharing that at some point.
Yep.
So for the parent, you know, it's important to have those multiple perspectives and connecting school and other environments. For parents and caregivers that don't have access to b.e.s.t, their school districts aren't using the b.e.s.t screening system, what are some key things to keep in mind or key strategies to keep those lines of communication open and productive and helpful for students?
I think what's very important is to understand that there's a lot of mismessaging that's been occurring on the school level, on the community level, that oftentimes I don't think we take the time to really get to the source of the communication. So people hear something from somebody who heard it from somebody else. I call this escalation of commitment. And by the time it gets to the third or fourth person, the truth is so far away from what really occurs or what's going on that people start to form an opinion about it. And the irony of it is that the further you are away from the facts, the more emotional position you have to an attachment to that position. So, you know, making effort to talk to school practitioners, calling up and supporting the school and saying, I understand there are some things that you haven't been able to decide right now. I wish you would have or could have, but I understand that things are different. Just like for our own life situation, there isn't a person that has not had some trepidation about multiple decisions. Should I do this? Should I not do this? What about if I do this or not? And to think what that must be like in a place where you're making decisions for multiple families and multiple children. So supporting your schools and supporting the classroom teachers and understanding the balance that they're trying to maintain. Secondly, is if you have a question and you're unsure of something, I don't think asking a neighbor or another parent for the answer is necessarily always the best route. I think if I have something I want to know about what's going on in school, I would call them. I would call them directly and ask the principal or my classroom teacher, really what is going on? Can you give me some facts or tell me what you know at this point in time? And then give, we used to call it in local parentis, that when you're in school, the school takes over as parents. I think we have some very dedicated staff members and families that want to work together. And I think we need to reinforce each other. We have to be able to support each other where we're struggling and not to make judgment or evaluations of what's good or bad, and to work on that collectively. And I think that's where the external assessor piece, frankly, will be very helpful, because when you talk to a person and you ask them questions and they are able to build on what the question is, you find out a lot more information about what they're dealing with and at the same time what you're trying to deal with as a classroom. So it's an informal sort of discussion and communication linkage that I think is important. And patience. I mean, honestly, I have to admit, and I would think everybody else is, I just want this to be over. I just want it to be done. And I just want to go back to all the other things that we used to do without thinking about it. But that's not going to happen. So how do you adjust to what is happening? How do you make this world? This is our world. So how do we make that happen and understand with the schools that it's going to be a hard thing for all of us to find some common thread, and it's going to be what we're going to make it. And if we maintain relationships and focus on the common interest, we won't have positional thinking. Everybody that I know wants kids to be successful and healthy. Every parent I've ever met has the same feeling, and I know there are nuances to that, but for the most part, all of us want the right thing. Let's focus on our interest instead of the positions that each one of us have. Let's try to find that common ground, and I think we have a lot more in common than we've ever talked about before, but we have to put it on the table explicitly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's super good advice for everyone right now, is to have patience and to try to understand, because I'm reminded all the time or frequently of how different my experience is from other people's experiences. And for me personally, sometimes it's not hard to forget, but it's like, oh yeah, there's people are really struggling. There's really some bad things and a lot of changes going on. And it's easy to get bogged down in the details of your day and forget that we are in a historic moment that is affecting so much. And you just kind of have to step back and just accept what is going on and be resilient. Like you were saying, that was a good advocacy for being resilient and just problem solving and finding the next solution and the way to move forward.
Yeah. And I think in the end, the old personal kindness, be kind to your mind, but be kind to your neighbor, be kind to your family. And to recognize that everybody's experiencing it in a different way. And I think if we can do that, we're going to, I think, have a better solution and feel better about what's going on. It's all incremental. It's all going to be part of our future, and we just have to be able to manage it. And it will, and it seems sort of trite to say it, but it does make you stronger. It makes you anticipate the next future issue you're going to have. And I think that when we live through a difficult situation like this and we successfully mediate it, which we will, we're going to feel bad about it. We're going to look back at it and realize how helpful that is for other future things we might encounter in our life. So I think that's important.
Yeah, great advice, super advice. Well, those are all the questions I have for today. Okay. And do you have anything else you want to add?
Just want to say thank you again for doing this, as I've really enjoyed the conversations. And I do hope that this is helpful to families and parents. And I think that our sense of behavioral health and how we feel about each other needs to be a priority. I know we all are concerned about academic success and want kids to be exposed to learning, but I like kids to feel good about themselves, and I like adults to feel good about where they are first. And then we can build on and engage in the things we think are important. So maybe step back a little bit
Yeah.
and reflect on really what is important in the real world.
Well, thank you, Dr. Hartwig. Hopefully we don't have any plans to do future videos right now, but that might change, and we'll look forward to talking about that.
Great.
So thanks for watching, everyone. We're signing off. This is Laura again with Dr. Hartwig from the b.e.s.t Universal Screening Tool, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.